Hello, everyone. My name is Brian McDonald. I work in residential life in student affairs at UCLA. And today we have an amazing conversation planned with three outstanding leaders here at UCLA. I'm joined by Anna Spain-Bradley, our Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, Martin Jarmond, our Athletic Director for UCLA, and Monroe Gordon, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. Today, our guests are going to be talking about everything from their roles in shaping the student experience at UCLA, how we continue our academic mission during COVID, our guests' thoughts on being Black leaders in the United States in academia during a time where society is reckoning with many different issues in relation to racism and other forms of oppression, and just talking about their hopes and dreams for the year, their desires for the student body and for all of our constituents at UCLA. So at this point, to kick us off, I'm going to have each one of our guests introduce themselves, and I will start with our Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Anna Spain-Bradley.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon to everyone who is tuning in. It's a pleasure to join this vibrant and dynamic UCLA community. I joined the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion just last week on September 1st. I come here from a previous set of professional careers. I was a lawyer at the State Department. I've been a mediator and a negotiator. I've done work at the United Nations. I recently lived in Boulder, Colorado, where I was a law professor for the last 11 years. I really enjoyed working with students in a bunch of different ways and doing lots of research. And now I join you all. And the thing about being in the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, at the end of the day, it's about community. It's about how we understand one another, how we see one another for who we really are, and how we build an authentic community that is, robust with a sense of treating each other with dignity. And that's what I'm committed to, looking at the ways in which my office and my fantastic team can help support all the great work that's going on campus already. We look forward to working with students more closely. We look forward to supporting and listening to faculty. And we look forward to making sure that all the work of many people that contribute to UCLA is recognized and seen.
Hi, my name is Martin Jarmond. I started officially July 1st, so I'm on month 3 as my time as a Bruin. And I'm excited to be here. I look forward to working with Anna and others. I haven't met really anybody yet, so I'm looking forward to a time when we can finally meet. But this is an interesting time that we're in college athletics and at UCLA. So I'm just excited to be a Bruin, and I look forward to having a robust conversation.
Hello, my name is Monroe Gordon. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, as Brian said. So I really appreciate, Brian, your facilitation here, and then also Martin and Anna, the fact that you are joining. I feel very fortunate to be a part of this, this group, and then also this conversation. So I've been at UCLA actually for about 14 years. I'm a former student athlete at UCLA from a long time ago. Every single year that goes by, I tell students it was the prehistoric age now that I was actually a student at UCLA, because it just seems like time is going very quickly. And then I went off to be a civil litigator for a little bit before finding my way back to the campus. I feel very fortunate to be in the role of Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, and it's a little difficult at times to really put in words the work that we do, because it is, I think, just so important, so timely, so critical for our student body. And maybe the thing I would say is we really take seriously the ways in which we develop and empower our students at UCLA. And these are all the students, whether we're talking undergraduates or graduate students on the campus. And also, I think we all take a lot of gratitude and pleasure in seeing what comes from students after they graduate, right? And as they become alumni. That's the work that we do, and that's what we take very seriously. So I'm really greatly looking forward to this conversation, getting to know my colleagues, and then also providing just my thoughts on where we are in this country and what that means and how it plays out in the work that we do at UCLA.
Thank you all so much. And Monroe, that's a great segue into our first question. Now, there's a number of things going on in our world that impact the work that you all do and how you prioritize, and just the way you strategize helping as many of our students as possible, from COVID-19 to the wildfires that are just into the news now, and a number of things. But I think all of these issues have a through line that I believe is really important for us to start out with, which is the national climate around race, and how this has impacted all of the other issues that you and your teams are focused on solving, as well as your own experience. And so maybe to start us out, let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on the national climate with response to anti-racist action, specifically a lot of the activism around addressing anti-Black racism in the country, how it's affected your work, how it's affected you.
So thinking about where we are as a country, what it means to be a nation, what is the United States of America? I start with this. We are more than a map of territory stolen from those who were here first to land conquered later. We are more than a flag, more than all of these things that are embedded in our Constitution. We are the people. And America is at this moment in our overall history where people are divided and united across many different concepts and ideas and feelings. And it's something that impacts all of us. For me, I would just tell a little story about this national moment. In 2016, after the election, I remember walking down the street in Boulder, and there was a dog sitting in the car, and the dog looked so sad. And I thought, this dog knows something. I don't know if it was what gender this dog was, but this dog was onto something. And I later that week had a long talk with my dad, who grew up in North Carolina and Virginia in the 40s and the 50s when it was segregated. And his dad, my grandfather, who's no longer with us, who grew up in the teens and the 20s, sharecropping tobacco in the fields of North Carolina, only a hand's throw away from the plantation where our ancestors were slaves. And my dad was a part of civil rights movement. And his dad, my grandfather, had a different philosophy. It was keep your head down and stay safe and stay alive. And they were both shaped by the moments upon which they came up. And in 2016, after the election, my dad looked at me and said, we tried, and we're back where we started. We might be worse than where we started. And Anna, it's your turn. And it was at that moment that I thought about my life and work as a law professor working on human rights and racism, as a mother, as a member of the community, and said, what can I do that's more? And it's what led me to apply for this role, this very important role at UCLA. And it's what led me to do a lot more work with people and with communities who are impacted the most. And so I think this national moment is a moment of strife and stress, but it's also in these hard moments where we can come together and realize we have so much more to gain together. We have so much more in common than we think. It's a common human trait. I've had the fortune of living or working in every continent except Australia and Antarctica. And the people all want the same thing. We want to connect, we want to belong, and we want to be treated with dignity. And so I bring that to UCLA and those kind of backgrounds and experiences to say, we can do this, but we have to do it together.
I would just piggyback a little bit on what Anna's saying there. I would just say, Brian, to your question, one of the ways that I have felt through this time that we've been dealing with over the last few months in particular, but honestly, well before that, right? I mean, the issues that we are discussing on a national level, this isn't the first time that we've been talking about this. It certainly isn't the first time for many of us to have to confront these issues. And there's an exhaustion that tends to take over, right, with everything else. And there are a lot of things going on in our world today, and a lot of expectations, I think, on all of us to be able to sometimes turn on the dime and get things turned around. And so as we also enter into this challenge, these very critical areas of social justice, I'll just be honest and tell you that there is an exhaustion that tends to take over. I'm just, very, very tired. And as a person, as a Black American, I also would say that I'm highly skeptical, right? And there's a skepticism just because of what has occurred in the past and the efforts that have been put forward. Important, very important efforts, as Anna was just saying, with her father and her grandfather, but efforts that have not always yielded the kind of results that we've wanted. Now, with that, though, there's an optimism. And this is where I definitely want to piggyback on what Anna's saying, because what I see now, and as I talk to my children, the fear that initially gripped me as I speak to 2 college-age kids and a high school-age child, the fear of what can happen to them out in the world turns to the optimism of what I know they can do, because I have that faith in them. And so as much as there is exhaustion and there is tiredness, which I think is just natural, there's also a high level of optimism. And, I would make the parallel and connection with that optimism to the work that we do in student affairs every day, and the 800 dedicated professionals that are in student affairs. And like I said before, we see our effort as going toward the development of students and the empowerment of students. And that is not for the faint or weak of heart to enter into and try to better and help. And it does come with times of exhaustion, but it also allows us to think about how we can be optimistic about our future, and that ultimately is what holds out with me as well.
Even under optimal conditions, when we're all together and campus is operating smoothly, and we have our status quo of everything that typically happens at UCLA, even under those optimal conditions, advancing social justice work, having social justice frameworks through which we do our work is hard. And so adding on to that challenging and important work, COVID-19, remote learning, and all the other different things that our society is faced with right now, how do you as leaders approach these incredibly important problems in terms of advancing social justice in our work amid COVID, during remote learning? How are you as leaders approaching these issues?
Brian, it's a challenging time in our country and our world. It's strange times. Just starting a new job for me, moving 3,000 miles across the country, and I haven't met my boss or my colleagues yet, or student athletes. It's been a challenge. But the way I look at these times is that first you got to breathe. You got to exhale and just understand what's going on, and you're not going to have all the answers. And for me, I just try to do one thing at a time. The best way, I like to say, the best way to eat an apple is one bite at a time. And so for me, I try to look at, what does this time and things going on, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to our constituents that we work with every day? And what does it mean to our student athletes that we serve? And for me, that's first and foremost. So I think you lead by example. And I know these times have challenged me personally and professionally, as far as the balancing of being true to yourself and sharing those thoughts and feelings of what's going on in the country and how that's impacting you, but also representing not just myself and my family, but obviously UCLA and our athletic program. And so that's a balancing act that you just have to make sure that is true and authentic to yourself. So I'll give you an example. Normally, I don't really speak out about things. That has not been my nature professionally. And after the George Floyd incident, a lot of leaders, athletic directors were putting out statements and that kind of thing. And I was quiet. And I really needed that 3 or 4 days to just reflect and think about what it meant to me, how I was feeling, it was a lot that I was feeling. It brought up a lot. And so I made the decision after actually talking to two student athletes, one from my previous institution, Boston College, and then I also talked to a young man, a football student athlete, about the George Floyd situation and their feelings. And what I heard from them was, this is a time now where we need to speak out. We need to hear and see from our leadership, from people that we look up to that lead, how this impacts them. And so I made the decision to actually go on ESPN radio and be vulnerable and share an experience about me getting pulled over when I was 16 years old, Friday night high school football game for no reason in the rain. And I got pulled over driving my mom's Honda Accord, and the officer came right to my car, told me to roll down the window, put a gun to my head. And there was no reason for it at all. It was a 35, I was driving, speed limit. Then I had to wait outside of the car on the trunk for 20 minutes. And that experience has stayed with me for the rest of my life. It has shaped how I see and view police officers, law enforcement, up until a few years later, when I got older and understood that that was one experience, that was one police officer that doesn't paint a broad stroke as far as the rest of law enforcement. But I had to come to terms, that incident brought that back for me. And what do I want to do, and how do I want to impact and try to affect change? Because for me, that was a moment that you can't sit on the sideline, for me personally. And that's what I have been doing. And so I think just being authentic and vulnerable was the way that I chose to lead. And I hope that our student athletes and some of my new colleagues who are getting to know me really learn about me and just how I'm looking at these times and how I'm even sorting it out now as far as how I feel. But I think it starts with taking a breath, exhaling, thinking about how these times impact you, and ultimately, what do you want to do about it? You know, how do you want to affect change or help people or help the situation? Because we all, I think, have to really grapple with that and understand that, and ultimately get to a place where we can sleep at night knowing that we've done what's authentic to us.
Yeah, that was terrific. I don't think I can improve on that response. That was a terrific response. I guess the one thing I would add to what Martin is saying, and Brian, it goes to what you were asking about in terms of the challenge here, is I think about our challenges that are related to COVID-19, as I think about our challenges that relate to social justice in so many different ways. I would ask us to think as a community how we want to build community, right? I think that's one of the largest challenges that we have, is in a more remote environment, how do you provide aspects and opportunities that allow individuals to truly build community? Because as we talk about these great challenges that we have, they don't get resolved without communities coming together and communities standing up and communities having a voice and communities saying things have to change. And so that's where I'm very interested within student affairs for us to really spend time with our professional staff, with our students that work with us, thinking about how do we in this remote environment provide opportunities to truly build community and to provide opportunities for folks to know that you are welcome, you do belong, and we want you not on the sidelines, but jumping in and being a part of this with us. And so that's the one thing I would add there, that I think it's a challenge for us, but again, the more work that we do together, I think the more it enables us to think about ways to really build a stronger community at UCLA.
We've talked a lot so far about what your beliefs and goals and aspirations are. And many of you are asked routinely, what are you going to do? What is your plan? So I think this is a good opportunity to share with our wide audience individually, what are your priorities for this year? What are those tasks that you look at as the most exciting, the ones that you are spending a lot of time thinking about and that you feel as we start a new year are the ones that you really want to enlist support? And how do you envision working together on those priorities?
Thank you for the question. I'll give it a try. So my role as Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and that of the dedicated team I work with, is to help and encourage the UCLA community to uncover and critically understand, as well as promote, what it means to be a community. And how do we do so in a way that upholds equity, diversity, and inclusion? That's a big think endeavor, and it's one that's a journey and not a destination. And we start with the ideas of what does equity mean? What does it mean in the classroom? What does it mean for people who are doing similar work but not getting paid the same? What does it mean for those in our alumni community who maybe graduated at a different point in time and think about things in new and interesting ways? What is inclusion? What does it mean for different groups of people who identify differently? And when we think about these things together, we also have to not just stay in the EDI world, but reach the hard issues of discrimination and bias, because discrimination and bias is at the core of activity, behavior, and ways of moving through the world that violate dignity. And as somebody who comes to this in the background of human rights, where people have their dignity violated around the world, bad things happen. And one of our goals in the EDI office will be to help reach out to members of our community who feel and know that their dignity is being violated in ways that it shouldn't. We want to hear from you, but we also need to work towards solutions. So a goal of mine personally is to recognize that we are in this moment together of going through a global pandemic on epic origin. We are in this moment together of moving towards a national election that has everyone on edge. And we're in this moment together of trying to stay healthy in really difficult circumstances. And we do that when we dialogue, which means talking, listening, thinking about negotiating our differences, thinking about how we can create something new. So we want to hear from people, but we also want to ask all of you for a bit of patience as we get going this year, and a bit of good faith as we aim to move talking and listening towards true meaningful dialogue.
From an athletics perspective, you know, we want to go about our work and serving our student athletes, and that's educating them, developing them, helping them grow, and honestly go through a challenging situation right now. They, you know, remote learning, obviously our fall sports have been postponed. So this is unlike any year that we've ever experienced. And you're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds who have been playing a sport, dedicating a lot of their life to a craft that they're, for the first time ever, not able to do. So there's obviously a strain there. There's a mental and emotional strain that is significant, in my opinion. And so I'm really focused on how do we help our student athletes navigate these chaotic times. These are strange times for all of us. And I know one thing, that we have to be together. To Anna's point about we're in this together, that's something that's going to be a bedrock for our athletic program is, you know, we're going to face this challenge. We are facing this challenge, and we're going to get through to the other side in a positive way. And we're only going to do it like this. You know, we're not going to do it like this. If we're separate and we have our silos and we don't engage and we're not interconnected with our colleagues, with our teammates, we're not going to get through this. But if we can be like this, we got a chance. And that's what our intention, everything, our energies and our focus is. How do we stay together? How do we help our young people? And how do we help each other navigate these times? And you're going to do it with empathy, with understanding. You know, when you come into a Zoom in a meeting, if someone has a family and has kids that might run into Zoom, you got to have understanding and grace. You know, you got to have patience. Schools being remote, some in person, some not. You know, there's so many dynamics that affect each of our colleagues and our teammates every day that you just have to really be empathetic, understanding, and have patience and grace with each other. And so that's kind of how I look at the work we have ahead of us this year to navigate these chaotic times.
In my response, I would start sort of where Anna and Martin ended, right, to get to the beginning, which is, I hear them talk. It's really evident that it's impossible, I think, for any of us to really achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve if we're not working together. And the just incredible work that Anna and Martin and their teams are doing impact so greatly the work that we do in student affairs. And, I think maybe the first place I would start, Brian, is just to say that partnership has to be key. It's got to be key across the institution and really beyond the institution. Now, as I think about priorities, of course, there are some sort of bedrock priorities that we take in year to year in terms of looking at the overall development of our students, trying to think about academic excellence and our interactions with that academic excellence, trying to provide true opportunities for students across the board for them to engage and be a part of our community. There's so many different things that we bring in year after year. And then also being very mindful of very specific populations of students on campus who have had to endure issues for they and their families, and trying to be mindful of how UCLA can then assist our students across the board. Beyond these areas, though, the one priority that I think will really be key for student affairs going into this year is the ability for us to truly interrogate our policies, our practices, our relationships in ways that allow us to understand whether we are truly providing a community and an environment that is equal for all. And I say that recognizing at UCLA, for the great diversity that we have in terms of those who work at UCLA, the wonderful dedication that they bring, and certainly amongst my colleagues in student affairs, the compassion and the care that we show for every single constituent that we come across. So the line of interrogation is not to say that we don't already think critically about these areas. It's to suggest that there is always a way for us to get better, particularly as it relates to this critical area of human equality and human decency. And so as I think about the work that we do in so many different departments in student affairs, there is a need for us to really foundationally break down the ways in which we do our jobs, just to ensure that we are doing them in the best way possible that allows for true equality for everyone. And we also have to be open to learn. And it can be a very difficult thing sometimes and a very scary thing. But we all have to, as Martin said before, provide each other grace so that we can put ourselves in situations where we can learn how to treat people in the best possible way. So that probably is going to be one of the largest priorities that I bring into this academic year.
In closing, we have a lot of Bruins listening today and many folks looking forward to the work ahead. So in closing, what are your thoughts as we open up the new year? What's your message to those who are at home watching this talk?
Hello, UCLA family, Bruins. I'm so honored to be among you and to do the important work of the Office of EDI. I would just end this wonderful dialogue by saying one word: dialogue. Dialogue is the authentic exchange of ideas and feelings where we listen and we communicate and we treat each other with respect and dignity in doing so. And it's through dialogue that we can truly construct needed change. I'm committed to dialoguing with you, and I look forward to building our community even stronger in the months and years to come. Thank you.
Bruins, I'm excited to work with all of you. I'm excited for this upcoming year, for our students, for our faculty, for our staff. This is an unbelievable community that I'm learning about now. And I would just ask all of my colleagues that are watching this, be hopeful this year. Be optimistic this year. Have good energy. I'm a big energy guy. And I would ask that all of us consider coming together. How can we help one another? How can we help our students? And how can we listen? Like Anna said, with dialogue, with empathy, with grace. You know, we've got to really open our hearts and our minds. You have to be flexible, be nimble, be open to change, be open to dialogue, be open to a different way of thinking, because we're all the sum of our experiences and we all bring wonderful, diverse experiences to the table. So I would hope that we're all open, engage, have healthy dialogue, teamwork, and most importantly, let's be optimistic and have good energy and have a great school year. I have confidence that we're going to come out of this stronger on the other side. And as long as we can have our open mind and open dialogue and really care for one another and how we can help and support each other, sky's the limit for this school year. So thank you for having me. And I'm excited to meet all of you at some point in the near future.
So I would just say I really appreciate, Brian, the facilitation today, the conversation that we've had, the ability for me to be a part of this terrific dialogue with my colleagues. And the one thing I would say, which would not be dissimilar to what you've already heard coming from Anna and Martin, is that I think we've got to be able to give levels of grace to each other. This is not going to be easy. As much optimism as I think is going to be necessary for us to take into this year, it's also important for us to recognize that we have a number of continued and new challenges that we will face. We have times where I think we're going to question our ability to continue. We're going to question our ability to persevere, and we certainly will question our ability to succeed. And this is why I think it's so vitally important that we are doing this together. Because the way for us to truly effectuate change is to do it within our community. And this is also why I'm so excited. I've been around UCLA since I was 14 years old, maybe 13 years old. And I was blessed enough to come here as a student athlete. I was blessed enough to be able to come back here and work. And I certainly have achieved a level of blessing that I didn't think I would in terms of being the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs. And for all of the different aspects of my engagement with the campus, the one thing that rings true, it rings true more than any individual relationship that I've been able to engage here at UCLA, is that the community is what ultimately has enabled me to persevere. And the community is what has enabled me to succeed. So I'm excited about this year. I'm excited about our resiliency, and I'm excited about opportunities for us to think about how we build community, both for those in the remote environment as well as those who are in person at UCLA. Go Bruins, looking forward to a wonderful year.
Well, that's going to bring our time today to a close. What's exciting for me and inspiring to me is that I know this is just the beginning of many important conversations that we will all have together. And so thank you to our speakers. I'm sure you would get a standing ovation if we were in the Pavilion Club or Royce Hall or wherever this would be. But thank you all so much. And we look forward to fall.